All right, let's call this meeting of the IFEDA to order at 5:40. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to approach the IFEDA at this time? Mr. McCarthy.
Good afternoon, councilors and mayor in the audience. First question is I'd like to ask is, what is the necessity for a development advisory committee like you're chairman of here, inasmuch as there's also the KFDA, which you recently had a joint meeting of? I don't quite understand that because we have so many different units here with economic development that from a cursory analysis here, it's almost where you muddy the waters here because you get into cross purposes. Fundamentally, economic development comes as a result of a individual or individuals who have business acumen plus access to a certain amount of capital if necessary. In essence, I do not see too many people that have had a record of accomplishment in that particular area. With respect to economic development here, I went to a meeting, rather a luncheon here, sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce here on Thursday, St. Patrick's Day, and it was for the former superintendent of the National Park Service here for Voyageurs National Park, plus the temporary superintendent here. I mean, not using the exact terminology to describe him, but the one in charge who was previously a maintenance man here. So, in addition, the Voyageurs National Park is primarily a government entity, even though it serves the public here, and the Chamber of Commerce, by definition here, and while I haven't been able to put my finger on the mission statement here, it doesn't, I don't believe it mentions that it should emphasize the aspect of government involvement. As a matter of fact, probably one of the reasons for the element of the Chamber of Commerce is because it acts and can act because it has a lot less stricture. They already have said that, in essence, that they are a private organization, although it didn't come out and directly said that. But when the issue of $48,025 was brought up by myself here with respect to the amount of taxation here that was provided to them here, it was indicated, number one, here that the amount that is capable or is able to be provided to Chamber of Commerce, irrespective of the size of this Chamber of Commerce, with respect to people, as far as membership, with respect to the amount of revenue that they have over a period of time, it's $50,000, whether you've got a population of 5,000 or 500,000 here. So the limitation here then has to, in my opinion, revert to what public purpose is this money being used. And the administrator here, Mr. Ken Anderson, very, very good in coming forth with the information provided by the statewide council here, that there should be, first of all, a public purpose here. Back to the meal, I don't see a real public purpose in that, sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce, because most of the people there were not directly involved in business. In addition, the financial controls there did not seem to be in real good place here, and I base this on my experience as an accountant, not a CPA. But you do not have to be a CPA in order to understand accounting. I successfully ran as a very young man from 1954 to 1956 one of the largest United States Air Force accounting offices in Nagoya, Japan. At the end of it, I received a commendation from the colonel, unsolicited, that arrived at my residence when I arrived back in International Falls. In addition to that, right now, if you ask for a current financial statement of a Chamber of Commerce, and this goes back to what I call financial controls, they only have the statements audited as expressed by the now current president, October 31.
Mr. McCarthy?
But wait,
we do have a 5-minute. I'll let you finish your one thought.
Okay. 5 minutes? Okay, but fine.
It's been 5 minutes. Yes, it's been 5 minutes.
Very good.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
Then you should disclose that you have a 5-minute deal ahead of time because there are people here that have appeared beforehand. I'm very happy to know if I know ahead of time. Okay?
It is written in the
I want people to really understand that I believe that this is a serious matter here and it should be addressed. We do not need all these economic development deals, and as a matter of fact, the Chamber of Commerce has now a committee on economic development with I don't know how many members, but the list is on the wall in the office of the President.
Thank you.
May I address one of the questions that he brought up, Mr. President?
Please.
On the authorities, there's good reason for having different authorities.
Please, with your voice and not your finger, please.
Pardon? What did you say?
I said, I talk with my voice, not my fingers. I would appreciate it if you would do it.
All right, we're going to move on in the agenda.
I just wanted to explain the reason, Mr. President, that there is an EDA and a KEDA because they're authorities, they're legal entities, they have authority to do certain things, and that's why they exist. So KEDA I think it was formed by the legislature, if I'm not mistaken.
It was formed by the
legislature, and it receives funding from a particular body of government, and so that needs to exist. And there is also a Kuching Development Authority, which is our similar entity as compared to the city's EDA. So it's an authority. It's the ability to act in certain ways, and that is why you have more than one EDA, you know. Just to be, yeah.
Thank you.
I fully understand that, Councilor.
Thank you.
However, the very authority of KEDA's receipt of certain monies may be under challenge because...
Mr. McCarthy, we're going to move on in the agenda at this time. Thank you. All right. Next piece of the agenda is to approve the minutes from January 19th.
I wasn't here.
Neither was Commissioner Anderson. I will tell you that they do look good. I was at the meeting and I agree with the points in there.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to approve them based on assurances from President Droba.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Any discussion? Question?
Yes.
Aye.
I'll vote yes. 3-0. Financial reports. We have the financial report as brought to us by Administrator Anderson.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the financial report.
I would second it, Mr. Chair, with the opportunity to discuss.
Absolutely. Discussion.
Thank you. City Administrator, I'm trying to understand the difference between the January and the February accounts, and it appears that the fund equity has increased by some maybe hundreds of dollars. Is that interest primarily that's been or is there monies from the general fund going into this?
Oh, there could be interest earnings. Let me look and see.
The difference, in, as I see, the revenue over expenditures year to date,
Is 21,000.
and then 22,000 in February. So the difference there, 600?
600.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know.
There's about overall, and I don't know, it depends upon how the money flows in. Some of this is paid quarterly, and I don't think we're doing accrual accounting when we book interest. So when the interest is actually paid is when the revenue gets booked. And as I recall, it's been a while since I've looked at this, I thought we had somewhere around $36,000 annually in interest income. It can go into the EDA and be spent outside of the requirements of the lease. And then there was other funding too, and now I forget what that was. But there was other funding that was involved.
Any other discussion on the January 31st or February 29th reports? Question?
Yes.
Aye.
I'll vote yes. And adopt a resolution approving the accounts payable. Do we have accounts payable this month? I didn't see that in the packet. I didn't think so.
None. If you look at the agenda, it says none. We didn't have any for this month, so.
I didn't think that you did. Review and discuss proposal of Arrow of the North for wetland project work. Come on up, Mr. Serrano.
Thank you.
And do you want to give some background on this?
Just some preliminary comments, Mr. President. There's been a considerable amount of work that's been done over the years, specifically related to the Miggins wetland acquisition for wetlands mitigation. And the EDA has had money budgeted for a number of years for there's a purchase agreement that exists to purchase Miggins property. I believe it's around 250 acres. There's a purchase agreement in place for $112,000, and then there's money budgeted in the EDA for associated professional services from both the attorney as well as Arrow of the North, which we have on contract to assist us with wetland issues and wetland mitigation and consulting as well as surveying work. So in looking at the status of the project after our public information meeting that we had with the Committee of the Whole of the City Council, we came to the conclusion that there's additional work that needs to be done to conclude the acquisition of that property. The Corps of Engineers is requesting some more information. And so I asked Mr. Serrano, and we finished our meetings probably at noon on Friday to put a quick proposal together. And so you see his email that he's prepared for you. And he's suggesting that in order to complete the Miggins Wetland Bank project, he would anticipate a budget of $30,000, and that includes up to $5,000 for legal fees. In discussing the legal fee issue with the city attorney today, he thought that his fee wouldn't exceed $2,000, so that amount could be reduced somewhat because of that. And you can see, and Dave probably might want to expand on this, but he's considering that another site visit will be necessary, as well as a site visit to Lake of the Woods County, which is where the Miggins property is located, for a technical evaluation panel meeting. So there's a fair amount of work that has to be continued to do that for Miggins. We also had some unused credits for the hospital project that was proposed to be located between the Essentia Health Clinic and the Good Samaritan site. And that project hasn't gone forward, but Dave was anticipating a fee of somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 to move forward with that project as well. So I think we want to have a discussion with the EDA right now about maybe a a brief update on the status of the projects right now, and then what continues to need to be done in order to bring some closure to the projects, and ultimately have you consider authorizing the expenditure of funds to finish up the work.
Thank you. Would you like to expand upon that?
Just briefly on the Miggins Wetland Bank, we received a response from the Army Corps of Engineers telling us how much credit they think we would be able to get from that project, and it was, I think, roughly 21.6 credits. So in order to complete that project, Ken asked me to put together a budget, and that's what he was describing.
Okay.
The hospital project, as Ken described, when the EDA gave the hospital credit for that property, which was shared with Good Samaritan, obviously the Good Samaritan was built and the hospital project never came to fruition on that property. We're looking to get that credit back, and the Army Corps of Engineers has asked us to calculate how much credit was used on the Good Sam and how much is left, or how much was unused with the hospital project. So the Army Corps is the one who came up with the credit values for that property. So I'd have to go and look at their work and try to figure out how much credit is left. So that's why we're looking for money there. And then one project that was not brought up is the first wetland bank that we had over by Birchdale. We had to do 3 site visits to that property to complete our end of the bargain with the for that wetland bank to get a release of all of the credit. So I think we have just roughly 2 credits to get released from that project, and we need to go do a site visit. We were put on hold from Sean some time ago from going to do that. Site visit costs roughly $800. And just the history of why Sean put that on hold was she was looking to see if she could get the DNR to purchase that property or do something with the DNR with that property and see if they could do that work, but I don't think that's gone anywhere.
So with the 2,000, or with the legal fees being roughly $2,000, we're anticipating $27,000 for the Miggins Wetland Bank project. Is that correct? If the legal fees are less, it would be $27,000 that we'd be looking at? Okay. And what was the original amount of credits we were looking at for the Miggins property in the beginning?
It's about 35.
35.
35, and it's down to 21.6.
We're at 2/3 of estimate. Less than 2/3.
Questions for Mr. Strong, please?
I guess I find the process here a little bit confusing because the city of International Falls has got a comprehensive wetland plan under consideration, and we're attempting to secure credits to be able to projects in the city. And so I'm wondering if we ought to turn the Miggins property purchase over to the city council and keep it together. And the reason I say that is that I think what might be a helpful strategy. I certainly deplore the guidelines changing. They seem to be very subjective, and they seem to be changing all the time, where we went into this conservation easement and this purchase of this property from Jim Miggins and hoped to get 35 credits. And now, because of these ever-changing guidelines under the Army Corps of Engineers, we're now down to 21 credits and maybe falling fast. I don't know. I think the Miggins purchase is worthwhile, but I would guess I'm bothered by the fact that we're only going to get 21 credits for, assume pretty much the same amount of money, maybe a larger investment of time and money here. And so I'm thinking that one of the strategies I would like to see us do is to complete our comprehensive wetland plan in the city and have Dave Serrano under Arrow of the North continue to work on the Miggins purchase, and we ought to make that purchase, I think, somewhere soon, but then take the two of those, the comprehensive wetland plan of the city and this Miggins purchase and conservation easement, and go to the colonel and plead our case to the colonel why we're only getting 21 credits when we are trying to do what is supposed to be the case under wetlands in the city of International Falls. It just seems to me we need to throw ourselves at the feet of the Army Corps and find out why we can't get more than 21 credits when we started this whole process 5 or 6 years ago thinking we were getting 35.
Who represented that to us, that we were getting, that there were 35? There was that, I don't remember who.
Well, that was an 8-to-1 ratio, which was the standard at that time. I don't know what the ratio is today.
The standard ratio for preservation comes out of guidance for the Army Corps of Engineers, which the maximum ratio for preservation would be a 1/8 to 1 ratio, or 12.5%. You can, those ratios can change if you do different property, but that coincides with what you get from the state also. So I think what's happening here is that the Army Corps says that they're changing their guidance for what they consider a favorable piece of property for preservation. So I think it's subjective.
Do you think that we could plead a case because it is subjective?
I think it would be worth it. I think it's worth it to do that. You know, I think it's better to do that than to try to do it on any other way.
Going to court?
Well, going to court or trying to do it on something technical.
I think the question before us is, and I would guess would refer to the city administrator, is where the 30,000 or thereabouts, whatever kind of dollars we're talking about here for Arrow of the North and for legal work, where that money would be coming from.
We had it in restricted, it was restricted, but I don't see it on our balance sheet as restricted.
I think
144,000.
we had 112.
It was 112 maybe.
And then I think there was 20,000 more.
Okay.
So I think it was 132 in total. Is that where we were?
That's sitting there. Yeah,
And
it's sitting.
it shows up on the balance sheet, let me see.
It's in the fund equity.
Comparison, it's in there. There's $112,000 under wetland bank acquisition and then $20,000 in professional services for the EDA fund.
I did, my bookkeeper's been gone, so I wasn't able to put a tally together of exactly how much we've spent on the first phase of this project. But I do recall when we did the first wetland bank project that we did all of our work directly for the city and worked directly with the city administrator and the city council. It wasn't until the project was complete and the easement and the property was purchased, that everything was transferred over to the EDA at that time.
I have a question, if I may, Mr. President. What about renegotiating the price? I mean, no?
Well,
Look, I guess I can answer
Yeah,
that a little
right.
bit if you'd like. To some extent, I think Mr. Miggins gave the city a fair deal on that piece of property. I think we've been sitting on it for a long time. I think during the course of, which is out of his control, and I think during the course of that time, wetland credits have become more expensive. So, in theory, his property could be considered more valuable, so I think it would be
Or choice to
hard
renegotiate.
pressed to negotiate them down.
I would think so.
I would also like to hear from the city attorney on that.
I agree with that opinion. When this first came out, because one thing I suggested is that we maybe renegotiate credits and rate the price. But since that time, I had several meetings that have much more information available to me, and it looks as though the cost, out on the open market of these wetland credits has maybe almost doubled since the time we entered into this agreement with Mr. Miggins. Also, at the time we did this, you had to be a governmental or public individuals to do their own banks and just sell them. And so Mr. Miggins might welcome our non-acceptance of the agreement. So I think that my advice would be let's move forward and close this transaction as quickly as possible. And if we can work with the Army Corps and through various avenues, as suggested by the mayor, to have them alter the number of credits they give us. So we have some for Mr. Miggins would be.
Right.
Anyone else have anything to add to the Miggins Wetland Bank project?
I guess I'm still trying to understand where the additional 27,000 is going to come from.
I think that's the
President,
question on the floor.
I would suggest that the money come from the EDA fund. There has been some monies been taken out in the past out of the PI fund for wetlands, and that would be a fund that is in Gary's department. I cannot give you the current balance in that fund. Betty was gone this afternoon due to an illness, and I didn't have time to check with Mary, so I don't know what amount is, but I do know that we deposited roughly $100,000 into our shade tree program at the end of last year, I think from timber proceeds, and we could transfer money from there to make up the difference that's not in the what's left in the EDA fund. We could redirect those monies to come up to the 27,000.
I had estimated earlier, because of the refinancing of the bonds, and that there is excess funds occurring every year under the contract. And that's why I couldn't remember the other piece of it, but there is $50,000 to $60,000 of annual net cash inflow into the EDA. So I would suggest that we take it out of the EDA, and why not? It's just sitting there. It's a fund that we don't have earmarked for any particular purpose at this point.
I guess I'm concerned about spending that much money, and I guess my question to Mr. Serrano would be, if we move, and I concur with agree with the city attorney that we ought to move forward with the purchase, and if we are willing, maybe willing is the wrong word, we're going to accept the Army Corps' 21.6 credits that we would get from the purchase and putting this into a conservation easement, how much more work would there really be? Do we have quite a bit that needs to still happen to close that 21.6 credit?
We do. I would anticipate at least 180 days.
Still that much before we can close?
Yeah. And I would, I want to be careful here that not saying that those credits and the completion of that project is guaranteed either. So, we have a good indication from the Army Corps of Engineers in the letter that they wrote to us that they think that's
21.
that's a credit amount that they're willing to work with, not written in stone.
So you still think we got about 6 more months of work to do through the spring and summer before we can close? And I guess to the question, if I may, Mr. Chair, to the city attorney, do we have any down payment or anything with Mr.? Are we into? Do we have a? I guess if we don't pay him for 6 months or we don't get this concluded for 6 months, does he have to stay as a seller to us?
No, in other words, is that agreement in what you put with this? I don't have, we did have a contingency that it had to qualify for these 35 wetland credits. So we meant that if we have made a down payment, if we backed off of it, we would get that down payment back. If we have a down payment, I think it's relatively minor. I would say between $2,000 and $5,000. We may have paid into the transaction, and this contingency on the Army Corps granting us these credits. I don't think we had a specific deadline. A specific deadline, you would use a reasonable time, and I think we're probably well beyond reasonable. I would say that if Mr. Megan decided he just wanted to walk away from this and tell us he was no longer interested, I don't know that we'd be able to force him to honor that contract.
Well, in the world of wetlands is a different time frame, yeah. But I would say that based on our experts here, I would agree that this maybe is still a sound purchase at the price of $112,000 for 21 credits. However, if we go forward and they keep dropping the credits, I would put a floor on that. If what happens in a few months if they come back and say, no, it's only 15, are we still interested? So I don't want to commit to this amount given any amount of credits that will finally be settled upon.
I would certainly keep you informed, all of you informed as to the progress of the project and any change in the credit amount, whether it was more or less.
Any other discussion on this? The chair would accept a motion at this time.
A motion to make the purchase?
To work with the Wetlands Bank and Arrow of the North for the continued work on the Megan's property.
All right. A motion to expend additional fees to further the effort to acquire these wetland credits. I'll make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
I would ask that the administration would tell us where the 25 to 30,000 is going to come from, and
Ask a question. I suppose we need to know that Mr. Miggins is going to still sell the property to the city, so I probably shouldn't start working on it until we know that.
Yeah, I think we need to go back to with Mr. Megan's and clarify where we're at, and I guess we'd also need to clarify, the old contingency at 35, is he still willing to delay the closing, and probably 6 months away from having a done deal. I'd be willing to do that at this point, but I don't know.
So they're that hot demand right now, that people are willing. It's interesting.
I wouldn't say they're in hot demand, but I think he wants to do something with his property.
But it's in the middle of, I mean, how many buyers are there out there?
He would do that. I think what he would do is up his own private bank.
Oh, is that what he's thinking? Okay.
I mean, I don't know that.
'Cause where it's located, it would be quite surprising to me to learn that there's many buyers for it.
Other than people for this use. I mean, that's what.
Essentially, the motion on the floor is to budget for, or allow for $25,000 to $30,000 to continue with the wetland bank. The administration would look to find out where the money would be, and contingent on if Mr. Miggins still wants to sell the property. Question?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll vote yes.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we ask the city attorney to contact Mr. Miggins and have an understanding that we're moving forward with the work by Arrow of the North to hopefully be successful in securing 21 or more credits, and that it's about 6 months away, and from being able to complete that, and that hope that he is still interested.
Well, I would suggest, Mr. Chair, that probably what we're looking at is doing a new purchase agreement with revised terms, and that's,
That would be.
with your directions, that's what I would do with them. Yeah.
I would move then that, as part of my motion, that would be that we would have a new purchase agreement with Mr. Miggins.
I can present that to the EDA board at the next meeting next month.
That motion would be in order. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional conversation or discussion?
President, is it necessary to enter into a new agreement if he agrees to move forward? I believe that you had indicated that if there was a change in the wetland credits, it could be negotiated. Is it mandated? I would like, if possible, to have a gentleman's agreement where we can move forward with the understanding it might take another 6 months, and this is an expression of the EDA's commitment to spend the money to make it close without giving him an opportunity to maybe say, no, I don't want to sign another purchase agreement, and I'm just going to do it because money for nothing. So can you just review the purchase agreement with it as it's written? I thought that there was just a window of opportunity that if we don't get the 35 credits and it's something different, we can renegotiate a new contract, but we don't necessarily have to. Is that incorrect?
I would have to review the terms of the agreement in order to answer that question. So.
And if you act on this motion, you would have an opportunity to grant the city attorney the authority to come back with another one if we have to do that. But if we don't have to, I think it might be good to just proceed as is. He's been in a couple of times. He's interested in it. We've expressed where we're at with it and that we're moving forward. We actually invited him to the meeting that we had with the Corps of Engineers when they were here, and he was unable to be here. But I think he wants, my impression is he's probably getting tired of waiting, but I don't think that he's not willing to continue working with us. That's not the impression I've had.
It's fun if he's had other offers.
That's the impression I've gotten.
That he's had other offers?
No, that he's willing to work with the city, provided the
Financials.
the city starts to work.
Any other discussion?
Well, we've got a motion for a new agreement, or what do we have?
Motion to have the city attorney meet with Mr. Miggins and have discussion or draft a new agreement, whatever, and the city attorney will use his best judgment in his working with Mr. Miggins.
I'll second that then.
It's already been seconded.
Well, I thought he changed it, but okay. I don't know anymore.
Question?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll vote yes. All right.
Chair, I would move that we would have the Megan's property purchase and wetland credits turned over to the city council to work in conjunction with the comprehensive wetland plan so that the city has both of those before it and can hopefully strategize a way to work with the Army Corps of Engineers in securing more credits.
Motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Well, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
Well, it seems to make sense since the only administrative staff we have now is in the city. That would be Ken. So if we're going to get something done, you need you need staff. So it makes sense to me that we do it.
Any other discussion? Question?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll vote yes. 3. And then we need to get to the point of the wetland credits for the hospital on the fee of $2,000 to $3,000 to move that particular project back to getting the wetland credits.
How many credits are sitting there?
I would say approximately 5.
5, okay. That we would be getting back.
That's
you think?
correct.
Okay.
Chair, I guess I would first of all authorize the expenditure of $2,000 to $3,000 to secure those the return of those credits, but I'd like to understand the strategy before we vote.
Fair enough.
I'll second that. What do you mean by strategy?
I want to hear from Mr. Serrano how we're going to go about getting those.
Well, it was a real convoluted process how the credits were used at the time. We were developing that wetland bank initially to offset the hospital project, and we needed roughly 10 credits for that project. During the course of that time, Colonel Christensen came up here and met with the hospital, and I think that we got better cooperation from the Army Corps of Engineers on that. While we were trying to get the credits placed in a wetland bank, the Army Corps wasn't moving fast enough. So rather than purchasing wetland credits out of a wetland bank, you have an option to do what they call project-specific mitigation, where you use acreage from a piece of property. For example, you could just take a 40-acre parcel, and if that qualified for preservation, rather than depositing that acreage into the wetland bank and getting your credits that way, you just use the acreage from that piece of property to offset your impacts. That's what the Army Corps of Engineers did. However, while they were doing that, took them an awful long time to get there. And when we got the paperwork for that to be done, the state had already deposited all of the credits into the wetland bank. So all of our credits for the state portion of that project were withdrawn from the wetland bank. The Army Corps hadn't didn't allow for the deposit of all the credits into the wetland bank. So what they're telling us is that they have to go back to the wetland bank scoping document and include more property to put back in, to put more property into the wetland bank so we can get the credit there. So Craig Jarnott, who came up here and visited with us, wants a credit amount that we're asking for, and then he's going to take that to his superiors to what process he's going to have to go through to change that wetland banking scoping document to get us that credit back. So I think that as we're working on that and the Megan's Wetland Bank and the Comprehensive Wetland Plan, if we're able to meet with the Colonel, I think that would also be a good topic for discussion with him, because it seems like a pretty convoluted process.
You lost me. I'll just say you did. Of course, I'm not trying very hard.
Lost in the
because it makes
wetlands,
my
okay.
headache when you...
So my motion still stands. Yep.
So we have a motion to pay the $2,000 to $3,000 for the credits that were not used on the hospital. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion?
Mr. President, so I understand it, does this include the $800 for the other couple credits too, or is that going to be in addition to this $3,000?
That's a separate project. It'll be an addition.
I don't have any motion to
We don't have
do
any
that
motion
yet.
for the
That's the Little Fork,
the
Birchdale property we're talking about.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I believe what I heard you say is that it would make sense while we're in, these projects are in process, is that it makes more sense for us to try and intervene, visit with the Colonel to get him to intervene so that we can have positive outcomes as part of both of these processes, rather than wait till they're done and then go approach him. Is that what I understand?
Comprehensive plan, and with the Megan's Wetland Bank, I would agree. I think that I would like to get the information that Craig has asked for to get to work on getting the return of the hospital credits back as soon as, if I can get him that as soon as possible, then we can find out if we're going to be getting any resistance to doing that. And hopefully if there is resistance, then
other discussion on this. Question? Aye.
Aye.
I'll vote yes. All right, so that brings to the very last piece of it, the comprehensive wetland management plan for the additional $800, which I believe that's correct.
no, that's not.
Okay, because we,
The first wetland bank that we did, which at that time we called the White Cedar Project, we needed to visit that site 3 times to fulfill the terms of the site visits that we had to do credits. We did 2 of those site visits, and we have to do 1 more. Basically, we go and do a field visit and collect a small amount of data to show both the Corps and the state that the project hasn't changed. So I think that we should do that. That would be the $800.
that would be the $800. Okay.
I'll move that we expend that and get that done. And $800 for the 3rd site visit to the Birchdale site, so that we can get how many wetland credits?
I don't have the number with me, but it's roughly 2 credits.
Motion to expend the $800.
Second.
Okay, we have a second. Any additional discussion on this issue?
How much have we spent so far on getting these 2 credits? Credits. At Birchdale. What has been our total cost to date?
I haven't
You don't know
done,
offhand, okay.
well, no, I have, I guess the question doesn't,
A nonsensical question?
well, I wouldn't put it that way, but, you know, we did that wetland bank project, and we got the bulk of the credits,
Okay.
which is what we used for the hospital project, and I think animal shelter, and we just need to fulfill our terms of our...
I see, okay. Thank you.
Any additional discussion? Question?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll vote yes. do believe that completes everything we have on wetland mitigation today. Am
I
I
think we had
correct?
a comprehensive
Oh, my
plan to
gosh.
discuss.
All right, yeah.
And I think, the Army Corps, the project has been adopted by Bowser, the state of Minnesota. Bowser adopted that plan, they took it to their board and got it approved. Somewhat, I had the schedule that I was looking for, but they needed to complete the project, and they hadn't, and we hadn't received any comment from the Army Corps of Engineers on that plan. I think it wasn't until roughly 8 months later that we received comments from the Army Corps of Engineers on that plan, and they're requesting some additional information on it. We've had a couple of meetings with and to discuss that work. I don't know that it would be the right time to put a budget estimate on what it would take to complete that work, in as much as we should maybe just give me the opportunity to work on that project on an hourly basis so that we can start to put something together for Ken and Bob to look at how they want to propose something maybe to the Colonel. We have, I would think that the major issue that we have with the plan, that we've asked the Army Corps of Engineers to extend us a 15-day comment period, so that when we receive an application and forward it on to them, that they tell us that they've received the application, and they tell us whether they consider it to be a complete or incomplete application. And that lets the applicant know whether they're going to start processing the application or not. So it's really something very minimal that we're asking them to do.
They should do that anyway.
Well, they consider their time restraints guidelines, and right now they're unwilling to do that. So I don't really see the need to spend a lot of money completing the rest of their requests if this is going to be something that you decide to plant your feet in the ground on.
Correct, though, is the comprehensive wetland management plan, isn't that under the city council? That's not under the EDA, am I correct?
That's right.
Okay, so this is just informational for us at this point anyways, because we can't act on it. But you got council members
Okay.
too, but I don't think we were able to act on that particular issue.
I guess you were done.
Does anyone else have any questions to ask of Dave at this time?
And I admit, this stuff, I have very little patience for it. That's part of my problem. Are you saying that we could do all this work and they could say, too bad you didn't get it in on time, or they could come back with some minor procedural problem and that would be sufficient to just throw it all out, the plan? Is that what you just said? Did I understand you correctly?
In theory, yes, and I wouldn't, I don't think I'd be sitting here asking to do the work if I didn't think there was a good chance of completing the project. I just don't want to mislead you.
Also, Mr. Chairman, also, we have adopted a plan. Yeah.
Right.
And we've submitted it, and the state has accepted it, but the
ACOE have.
The Army Corps has not. And the Army Corps wants more information, and sounds like they're not willing to approve it acted. And so, what we're talking about is revising our plan accept it the way it is.
Thomas.
Thank you.
I'm sure it won't.
Any other conversation about the wetland? Thank you, Dave. I appreciate your time. Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 6.
Move that we deny the renewal of the membership in the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits. We spent enough money tonight.
Have a second?
I guess I second. Again, there's no staff, so what's the point?
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and at this time, did you reach out to the previous director on this particular issue?
I did. I think the principal reason for being members is that they have a good source book for various
Grants.
grants and loan programs that we might be able to access. And I did go down into that office and search for it a little bit this afternoon. I didn't find it, but there's a lot of moving going on right down there right now, so I didn't see it. But that was the principal reason. And
I have a copy if you want one.
I know that she has
Price
it.
is going to be $50, though,
I
right?
don't.
I mean, it's pretty nominal, but
Well, I mean, that goes to a question is what memberships should we even belong to if we're really, we don't have any members we don't have any active staff to send to any meetings, you know?
Any other discussion on motion? Not question.
Aye.
I'll vote yes. Discuss and approve right of entry form and Great Northern Transmission Line Project, property data report.
And why is this coming here?
The EDA owns the property.
Oh, okay, that's a good reason.
I would move that we approve the right of entry form for the Great Northern Transmission Line Project with regard to the property that they are seeking an easement on.
I haven't read it, so I don't know. What do you think, Mr. Attorney, City Attorney? EDA?
I think we need to have
Okay,
a second.
I'll second.
We have a second. It's open for discussion. City Attorney.
here's the problem, is that this particular, the 240s they are interested in are part of our original wetlands bank. So we have a perpetual conservation easement with the state of Minnesota, and the terms of that basically preclude even sticking a shovel in the ground. And so, I think if we approve the right of entry form, we need to be very specific in here. On the form, in the middle of the page, access limitations requested by grantor, if any, that they would need to comply with the terms of our perpetual conservation easement and obtain permission for any type of access from the state of Minnesota, because we don't want to be violating our conservation easement requests. And I think that they're going to find it very problematic to visit the site and go in there, because I think any drilling, even small drilling, is prohibited by our agreement. And they're going to need, I think, some specific language. And there is terms in our conservation easement that any exceptions have to be approved by the state of Minnesota. So
We're, with that stipulation, then we should be fine.
yeah. We want to be cooperative, but we have very strict limitations on those two properties that they're looking at.
Wouldn't it really be nice if our various levels of government or various agencies of government could work together? And we've got a conservation easement on this land already, so it's locked up forever, never to be used, never to be touched by anyone. But here we have an opportunity to help the the communities and the state of Minnesota, the county, with a transmission line that's coming through. It's going to mean tax monies to this county. And wouldn't it be nice if we could use a piece of property for two things? A transmission line and have a conservation easement on it? You know, we promised not to do anything to it other than just maybe we might have to put a pole in the ground.
It would be nice, but you still have to go through the process. Yeah.
I think we advise them what we're up against here, but we wish them. I don't care if they comply or not. I mean, if they want to drill a hole in there, it's good enough for me.
But we can't say that.
I can.
Well, you're not president, so maybe you can get away with it, but you can't say that. We can't be condoning.
No. We have an easement, but we certainly make our company aware of it, and we give them the right to enter and to discuss with the holder of the easement.
That acceptable to the,
I would draft some language that I would put in there, but essentially that's what it would say, as long as they comply with the terms of our easement or get permission from the state of Minnesota to vary from the terms of that. I think it's not up to us to we can give them permission to walk on the property. We can't even give them permission to drive vehicles over the property.
But we can give permission to walk.
We can give permission as long as they're, yes, they're not doing anything disturbing, the wetlands.
Well, Mr. Chair, if you look at this handout that we just got with regard to the Great Northern Transmission Line, Judge Ann O'Reilly has published the facts, conclusions of law, and recommendations, and she has approved the route of and the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission has also. And next to it we have the right-of-way easement process, and they're going to start doing field surveys and so forth come this spring. So I think we ought to move and just help them to keep this thing going. I mean, if the judge has approved it, why should anybody else stand in the way of it?
Well, I think we just need to be prudent and make sure that we're not exposing ourselves to any liability or a position where we have violated our agreement with the state. So I would agree with Steve. I mean, let's just put that in there.
I think particularly, we're in the process of seeking more conservation easements from them, and if we're not complying with the first one, I think we damage our chances of getting any more in the future.
Right, there's that too.
so you made the motion, would you accept a amendment to have language?
Yep.
I'll make that amendment. Okay, whatever Steve said.
And a second.
Yeah, in a second.
Any other discussion? Please.
I think what I would envision happening, and what we had talked about before, is we'll complete the right of entry form, assuming you go forward with this motion. We'll attach to the right of entry form and the other questionnaire that they have, is we'll just attach a copy of the easement that we have, the perpetual conservation easement, and then disclose that, and they'll have to comply. And part of my conversations, verbal conversations with Josh May, who's the guy that I've spoken with about this, is that he's indicated that 70% of all the properties where this transmission line are going to go are state-owned properties. And as the mayor pointed out, there's a lot of progress that's already been made with doing the field surveys, and that's exactly what this is about. So I'm assuming that there's the state is going to be open to, because of the consequences of this project, in granting some form of an exception from the conservation easement that we have. It'll have to be properly documented, and so that's how I would envision moving forward, and as long as the commission understands that, that's how we'll proceed.
Any other discussion? Question?
Aye.
I'll vote yes. All right. Status of the 2014-2015 Strategic Action Plan update.
Given the hour, I would...
No, I'm just going to make a quick mention of it. We're not going through it.
Okay.
We're not doing anything. I'm just going to tell you where we're at. I met with the advisory board. It's one of the things that we've been kind of looking at. I won't lie to you, we are having a hard time getting quorums at the advisory board. With that being said, we were right on the cusp of having one. The new members have been showing up, and we've had a great discussion. One of the things that we're looking at doing is putting together some ideas, but since we don't have anything concrete, we have not made any actual plans. One of the things that we did look at really quick was what the EDA advisory board would be focusing on moving forward. One of the conversations was helping with business incubator inside the city limits and working possibly with KEDA to do that. So that's that. We will move on to advisory board vacancies. We have 4 open positions. At this point, we have advertised them twice. We have not gotten anything. We will just keep the openings. If people are interested, they can come, but there is no reason to, in my opinion, there's no reason to continue advertising. We have 8 people, and it makes it easier to have a quorum. So.
You have to make any change in any document?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Bylaws read that you can have up to 12. It doesn't say you mandatorily have to have 12. All right, project update report. Projects?
I don't think I have anything else I want to say regarding projects. I would just draw your attention to some informational items I included in the packet from various sources, and it's kind of interesting reading that story on Plymouth working to attract and keep businesses. You know, it's a huge city, 70,000 people. I think they reference in here that they were the largest city with medical device companies, or the largest concentration of medical device companies, and they're still trying to reinvent themselves and create themselves much like we've tried to do forward. So we're not alone in that, and they've got a lot of assets and resources to try and work in that particular field.
Rather sobering when you look at the history of the IRRB and all of their funds they had and how far they got.
Any other business to come before the IFEDA? None, we will adjourn.